1, 2, 3, 4, now she's ready, now it's time. A Boston girl who knows true crime. She got cash, attitude, but a person in a dark blue. She knows Monday, she knows summer, you now she's ready, now it's time. A Boston girl who knows true crime. She got cash, attitude, but a person in a dark blue. She knows Monday, she knows summer, Penny after dark.
Hi and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight is another one of my book reviews, but I must say up front, this is a bit different than the typical true crime books, if you will, that I typically cover. However, this book is amazing nonetheless. I just got it on Saturday and I finished it pretty much immediately and knew I just had to do an episode immediately right away. So the book that I will be talking about tonight is Surviving the Survivor by Joel Waldman. It is a brutally honest conversation about life and death with my mom, a Holocaust survivor, therapist, and my podcast co-host. So for those of you who do not know, Surviving the Survivor is an amazing, amazing podcast. It is a true crime podcast. So I am giving you a little bit of true crime, I suppose. But it didn't always start out that way. And they kind of found their niche in true crime, which I will get to that as I review the book. But this will be the book that I am covering tonight. So it's going to cover a lot of things, pretty much as it says, life, death, and all of the in-between, including the podcast. So stay tuned for that. And before I do that, I mentioned earlier that I got this on Saturday. So I was able to go to the book tour that Joel Waldman and his mother, Carmela, did. And I got to meet them. I'd already met Joel at CrimeCon last year. So I was seeing him again, but meeting Carmela, his mother, for the first time. And she is amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing Joel next week at CrimeCon in Nashville, because I will be there for CrimeCon and so will he. So I did get my picture with them for the meet and greet after. So I did just want to share that again, just to put a little bit of context to who they are, kind of just besides the cover on the book. So let me pull that picture up. There we go. Yes, so that is me, Joel Waldman, and his mother, Carmela. So they are absolutely amazing. If you get nothing out of tonight, it's go subscribe to Surviving the Survivor podcast and pick up this book. At the very least, that's what you'll get out of tonight. So, all right. Before we dive into the book, let's see who's here, and then we'll kind of go from there. Let's see. Hey, Paul, I am surprised to see you here, to be completely honest. And you're the first one in the chat. Oh my God. You must be bored tonight with no plans if you're here. Hey, Linda, good to see you. I've missed a lot of lives. Yeah, Linda, people have been asking where you've been. Of course, Russell being first and foremost. Where's Linda? Where's Linda? So do know that when you are not here during the lives, people do notice and they do miss you. I'll be leaving. Of course you will. Of course. I'm surprised you're here in the first place. I view that. At least hit the like button. Help a sister out. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, little Milky. Good to see you. Hope you're doing good. So as people kind of come in, I will keep an eye on the chat, but let's dive right into the book. So again, if anybody came in a little late and missed the cover, this is the book that I will be reviewing tonight. Again, very, very different than the typical true crime books that I cover. So if you're expecting a full-on true crime book, you're not getting that. You're not getting that. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Linda. I'm sorry. I hope you're doing better. Hope you're on the mend. But I'm glad you're here because again, people have been asking where you are and how you're doing. For Christ's sakes, Paul, just do something nice for once, you know? Hey, Fiddle, good to see you. All right, so let's dive on in. So the book I mentioned again, it's a brutally honest conversation about life and death with his mom, Carmela, about being a Holocaust survivor, therapist, and podcast co-host. So the back of the book, I will just read that. I typed it out just so I didn't have to look in a weird direction. So Holocaust survivor and licensed therapist Carmela Waldman shares brutally honest advice about life and death, often deploying brutally sharp wit with her son and podcast co-host Joel Waldman. Carmela Waldman is an 80-something psychotherapist and Holocaust survivor. Her son, Joel Waldman, is a successful broadcast journalist. After a discontented Joel chooses to leave his network news job, he gets a crazy idea for the step in his career. What if he and his elderly mom did a podcast together? The two embark on creating a show together and name it Surviving the Survivor. Things get off to a bumpy start as the lovingly dysfunctional mother-son duo struggle to figure out the art of podcasting on the fly, sometimes feuding, sometimes laughing, and finally mastering the format and watching Surviving the Survivor break out as a wildly popular true crime hit. Along the way, the two discover things about each other that they never knew. Joel is stunned to learn that Carmela survived World War II by hiding in a boys' Catholic school. Carmela also sheds light on the emotional struggle she endured when Joel's older brother, Rami, died of an incurable illness. She's also struggling with the inevitable loss of her husband of 63 years, which she describes as the most difficult experience of her life. Mastering podcasting is one thing. Figuring out the meaning of life is a challenge of an entirely different order. In real time and, quote, on air, end quote, mother and son engage frankly and movingly with each other for the first time as adults, discussing child rearing, aging, illness, death, and the secrets to enjoying life, no matter how complicated it gets. I know that was a bit of a long description, but everything said there that Joel describes on the back page of the book is spot on. And that's one of the things that, disclaimer, that I love about this book, and I'll mention it at the end, is you really get both Joel and Carmela, but she's nicknamed Carm. So Joel and Carm's personalities really shine through in this. The rawness of them, but also the wit and the humor. And it really keeps the book just flowing so nicely. And those kind of hard to discuss, kind of tender moments, they're there, but they have that little bit of, wit to them as well. So that, again, is spot on the way it is described in the book. Let's see who's here before I continue on. Hey, Tony, good to see you. Beckham, the best opening line at a meet and greet is, I see us having a coffee with us. Beckham, is that how you picked up Shelly? Oh, man. No kidding. I know. Beckham, Yankee Candle needs to sponsor us because the amount of candles that Beckham has when we do our lives, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. All right. So moving on with the book. So the book in itself, just kind of structure-wise, it's 316 pages, but it is I would say it's a quick read in regards to, it just flows so nicely and so effortlessly. So there are some books, I won't name names, that I can only read in small doses, maybe 25, 50 pages at most. And then I'm just my mind can't take any more. And it's not so much content, it's more of just a structure, the way that the author presents forward. This is not like that. I blew through this book. I honestly could have just sat and read it in just one sitting if I had the time to do so. So if you are looking to kind of just have one of those just easy to read books structure-wise, where you just can kind of sit and it's effortless to read, this definitely is that. There are pictures at the end, black and white photos, which are absolutely beautiful, going back to Serbia. And if you're wondering, what does that have to do with this? Well, stay tuned. But again, the book's pictures are absolutely incredible and give amazing context to the subject that is at hand in the book. Rock and Rita, amazing book. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is an awesome book, an amazing, amazing book. So I'm wondering if you have you read it? If so, let me know. Or if, I know it's been getting great reviews on Amazon. So it just recently came out. So I know that has been, yeah, Joel over on the Surviving the Survivor Instagram page has been posting a lot of the reviews that the book has been getting, and it's absolutely awesome. Yeah, this, I would have loved more pictures, but that's just me being selfish in this. But the pictures that they do show here are just spot on to the different chapters in the context that you get from this book. So there are 14 chapters and they all have a theme. And it's funny because each of the titles of the chapters are a different Carm quote. And usually it's a very funny quote. And then you kind of read through, and again, it has that emotion to it where you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a heavy topic. But then you have Carm's wit right there with it. So again, each of the chapters have a Carm quote to lead them off. And the book, again, I mentioned this a little earlier, it has the best balance, honestly, that I've ever seen in a book of being extremely emotional and just pulls at your heartstrings, but also being witty and funny at the same time. And that wit and humor does not minimize any of the emotions that are being discussed in the book. It also doesn't mock it in a way. It's the most perfect balance. And with that, you get the complexity of both Joel and especially Carm, because that's just sometimes how people process things, is with a little bit of humor. I know I'm like that personally. So I really related to Carm's kind of, I would call it defense, or kind of just distraction way of kind of putting out like a quick comment or, a quick joke or something witty. And I really related to that, but you really get to see that shine through with both Joel and especially Carm. But again, it's that perfect balance of a book being very emotional and having that funniness and wit to it. There were times when I was reading the book, completely honest, and it takes a lot for me to get emotional. I don't know what that is, for better or for worse, but there were times when reading this book, especially towards the end, where I would legit be in tears, and then within 90 seconds be laughing, like just laughing hysterically at something that Carm had said. And it was like that kind of up and down roller coaster, which made it a lot easier to read as a reader, kind of digesting this information, but also just to be able to follow along and not be too brought down in regards to some of the extremely heartbreaking things they're talking about, but also not having it be too funny where it's just like, wait a minute, it's taking away from what's really going on here. Again, can't stress it enough. Perfect balance. Well done, Joel. So, okay. Oh, fiddle. I mean, that's just because you're 40 going on 15, if that, but that's okay. All right. So one of the things that you get, again, with both of their personalities, and it's not left for you to guess. They just put it right out there, the good, the bad, the indifferent, everything. And I like that because you instantly feel a connection, not just with Joel, the author, but with his mother, Carm. And Joel is constantly worrying throughout the entire book about the book being published. He's wondering, will they have enough material? Will it finish in time? All of those worries. Even trying to get information and stories out of Carm. She will maybe give Joel a one-sentence answer or maybe a one-word answer. And he keeps saying, come on, Mom, this isn't a Twitter post. This is not a magazine article. We're trying to write a book here. And throughout the book, Carm is right on Joel, like doesn't let him skip a beat. And it is the funniest thing to listen to. And again, I was fortunate enough to meet both of them together and see them together during this book tour on Saturday night. And that's exactly how they are in person. And it was not only the cutest thing to see, because that love between them as mother and son is just such an unbreakable bond, but the humor that they have with each other was next level. And it was so funny to witness in person. So that kind of gave it just something a little extra special when I was reading the book, because I'm like, I got to see that play out. So, like Carm would say, let me tell you something. I warned you from the beginning that I'm a very average person and that nothing unusual would come from me. And that was a quote directly from Carm. And throughout the book, there is actual voicemail excerpts from Carm to Joel, and they are hilarious. Let me just find one of the pages just to kind of give you guys an idea. So you'll see the chapter ending, and then when the next chapter is about to begin, there'll be a page where it's actual voicemail and the date of the voicemail, and it's so funny. My two absolute favorite ones was, and again, you just get the sense from Carm calling her son, November 17th, 2021. And she says, Joel, at 9:00, your father and I are watching a movie. Soon we will be out of commission. Your father might try to get romantic. He still can't get enough at 87. Okay, love you. Goodbye. Amazing. And then my second favorite one, which kind of relates more to their podcast, Surviving the Survivor. February 19th, 2023. Joel, you just called me. Long pause. Call me back, handsome. And then she's fumbling with the phone. What time are you picking me up for the podcast today? I'll be waiting for you by the service area all by myself. I hope a stranger doesn't attack me. Just kidding. I'll be fine. Your little old fragile mom will be fine. Oh, I'm sorry. I know you hate the word fine. I'll be excellent. Click. So funny. Absolutely funny. So the book goes into describing, again, the podcast, Surviving the Survivor. If you're all into true crime, hit subscribe. You will not regret it. So it's one of the few podcasts, if any, that is co-hosted by an elderly mother and her middle-aged son. Their words, not mine. They launched the podcast in the winter of 2021, which, as we know, was the height of the pandemic. And when they launched it, it was, quote, out of sheer boredom, end quote. So one of the things that is asked is, what is your understanding of surviving the survivor? And what Carm says, like most things, it evolves. But I think you perceive me as the person you need to survive because I'm a tough cookie. And I don't let you, bullshit me to death. You can't manipulate me that much. You can more than most, but it's still hard for you, end quote. When the podcast started, it was just one day a week. So if you go back to like the old episodes, you're going to see the content is a bit different and it's less frequent. Joel would pick Carm up. They both had their masks on, again, during the pandemic. And at 2:30 p.m. every Wednesday, they would head to the studio to record. The way it transitioned into them switching to true crime was after they came across the Dan Markle case, which is, again, a true crime case. They honed in on being an exclusive true crime podcast after that point. And I know I have talked about that case kind of as things have updated during my True Crime and Chills. So it's kind of sporadically been talked about on my channel. So if you want to know more, go back to some earlier True Crime and Chills. But they really, really covered it because that was just what, grabbed their interest. So the podcast, when they did that, it grew to more than 100,000 YouTube subscribers with well over 1 million views per month, which is phenomenal and amazing. So they have what is called STS Nation. Again, they went from doing that one show a week, except for on Saturdays. I'm sorry, one show a week, but now they do it every single day but Saturday. They are always live, which is awesome. So you have two options. And when I went to the book tour on Saturday, just kind of meeting people there who were for the book tour as well, kind of chatting with them, how do you get Surviving the Survivor? And it was mixed. Some people watch it live on YouTube where you can see all the guests, and because they have guests on every single episode, and you can kind of follow the live chats as it goes, and he'll be on for hours. Or what I do personally is, just because it's easier for me with my schedule, is I download their podcast. So I typically listen to podcasts when I drive, when I work out, all of that stuff. So that's how I get the podcast personally. But either one is an awesome option. So you can't go wrong either way. But again, they went from such a small one show a week to now it's basically every single day except Saturdays. And they chat in real time from all corners of the world. So the book will get a little bit more into Joel. And one of the things that Joel talks about is, with being on YouTube and all the different platforms, he asked his mom, Carm, what it's done for her psychologically, because again, she is a therapist, retired at this point, but a therapist, so in the field nonetheless. And what Carm says about this is that, well, psychologically, I'm not sure, but you don't have to believe me. It has really helped me counter aging. It's revolutionary for me in terms of feeling and staying young, which I think is just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. One of the things that Carm also says is, contrary to what you think, I work on shows, co-host with you, I research the topics, I read the books, and I Google everything I need to know. It keeps my mind sharp in the same way doing crossword puzzles helped me. Instead, I focus on true crime, which I love because it's mostly based in psychology. That is amazing. So again, when Carm is on with him, don't expect her just to be sitting on the sidelines and, commenting here and there. No, she is active. She is well researched. She is well spoken. She is intelligent. She is everything. She's absolutely sweet, but yet puts her son in his place, the drop of a hat when needed. So it's the perfect balance. I cannot say enough wonderful things about Carm. Honestly, after meeting her in person, I was like, oh my God, I love her. I want her to be my best friend. To be completely honest, I was like, I love her. So before I continue, let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Linda's saying, I always think it's good when someone can add humor to an awful time in their lives. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Oh my God, Danny, I saw them on a podcast. It just hit me, Carm. I'm so glad that you said that. They are awesome. Absolutely awesome. Carm is amazing. I saw a podcast on OJ that they did. Okay. I found them by accident just looking on YouTube. Carm is great. I cannot tell you how many podcasts I have found, or even just other YouTube channels, when I'm trying to find other things. I think that's the story for a lot of us, to be perfectly honest. So regardless of how you found it, I think that's amazing. And yeah, I'm going to give that a star. I'm giving that a star because Carm is absolutely great. So the relationship that Joel describes with his mother, Carm, and I can't understate this enough. So he says, quote, Carm and I have always had what many describe as a unique relationship, albeit highly dysfunctional. We love hard, but we argue and fight just as hard. This is evident on their podcast, and it's very evident in the book. So keep that in mind when you're reading. At some points, you're just like, oh my God, it's just the back and forth, but it's not too much. It's like the perfect balance, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's like you're watching two family members bicker from a corner, and you have that feeling like, I'm not supposed to be intruding and listening, but nonetheless, you're like right there with them. So the love that Joel has for his mother, Carm, is one of the most beautiful things to see. And I want to add to that. So when the book tour ended on Saturday, there was a few people that I met there, and we were standing outside of the bookstore and just kind of chatting, talking about Surviving the Survivor, their podcast, the book, and then just other cases that are happening in this area, like the Karen Reed case, and whatnot. And long story short, while we were just, me and these other people that I just met at the book tour, were just standing outside, just casually talking, Joel and Carm, they're heading out. The night has ended. They're leaving the bookstore. And he, from what I remember, he had like his arm around her, or because there was some steps to kind of get past the sidewalk, but he had her right there, held on to her. They were walking so slowly to get to the vehicle. And it was just one of those like us, like as much as they just bickered in front of us at the book signing, it was just such a loving moment that I wouldn't have been there to witness otherwise, but I was so thankful enough that I was, because it was just such a touching moment to see. And I'm sure to them that's just their everyday, you know, they're running around doing errands and he's just helping his mom. But it was just such a beautiful moment. From an outsider looking in, it was absolutely beautiful. So I just wanted to add that. So one of the things, again, Joel says in describing his mom, he says, quote, "My mom is a huge part of the success. She is still super sharp and, as a licensed therapist, brings unique perspective to each story, along with the wisdom of all that she's endured in her 84 years. My mom is definitely this cult of personality. People get genuinely upset with me for my perceived, or maybe real, lack of patience when it comes to getting her points across on air," end quote. And that is absolutely spot on. Again, he's giving her all the love and respect, but still kind of being like, yeah, you know, I'll give her these little jabs here and there. Another example is Joel says, "I'd hit a nerve with my mom. She felt responsible for my anxiety." And that's one of the things in the book Joel talks about throughout, is his anxiety. And almost like Carm is faulting herself for propping him up too much in life. And one of the things that Carm says is, "It's my fault that you think you're hot shit," which I think is just like amazing. And she says, "Everybody carries their own burden in life, but unlike the advice your father gave you to mind your own business, you never do. You are constantly looking over your shoulders to see what others are doing. You're metaphorically constantly comparing penis size. Just mind your fucking business and write this book, and don't worry if anyone will read it. That's not your problem," end quote. And one of the things throughout the book is, again, when I mentioned earlier, Joel is stressing, when will, is this book going to happen? Are we going to get it done? Is there going to be enough information? She keeps saying, no one's going to read it. I'm boring. I have nothing to add, type of thing, which is like the furthest thing from the truth. But you kind of see that back and forth kind of little quip between them. The book also talks about Joel's background. So Joel, he grew up in New Jersey, and then he attended and graduated from Brandeis University, which, shout out Brandeis, absolutely amazing school here in Boston. So not that I didn't like Joel to begin with, but when I'm like, all right, Massachusetts boy right here, he went to Brandeis, like amazing, amazing school. Love him 10 times more. So after graduating from Brandeis, he got his life and career into media after a friend suggested that he apply for the NBC Page program. About 27 years later, he's now a former cable news correspondent and past member of mainstream media. Throughout the book, Joel discusses the topic of how he always worried about money, wanting to be financially secure, although Carm calls him and his wife out frequently for frivolous spending. Okay, before we go a little bit more, good night, Fiddle. Good to see you, hon. Take care. Linda, that's how I found the Paulcast. Oh, Linda, I'm so glad you found us, but at the same time, like, oh, I'm so sorry at the same time. Well, finding me, Danny After Dark's a blessing. Finding Paulcast, not so much. I'm just kidding. But no, I didn't know that. That's cool. Good to know. Good to know. All right. So one of the things that Joel also discusses, and I did not know this till he mentioned it during the book tour, and then I read more about it in the book, was he worked for Michael Moore, the Michael Moore, in 1999. Michael, again, had heard about Joel's mom's story surviving the Holocaust and was intrigued and strongly encouraged Joel to travel to Israel and Europe to document it all. And as soon as the show wrapped with Michael in 99, he did that. He traveled to Europe and Israel with his mom and grandma, as well as other relatives and close friends. So he already had all of that prior to this book, which I thought was really, really cool and really special. So one of the things that Joel says to his mother, so what do you attribute your success to. She says, again, in typical Carm fashion, I'm telling you, schmuck, we did what you and your wife never do. We saved. We built it up, and we never lived beyond our means. So the success here that they're referring to is just success in life. And obviously it focuses a lot on financial, because again, that's one of the things that Joel stresses on throughout the entire book. And something that money just doesn't really seem to bother Carm. And that's a theme throughout the book as well. So I know, right? I know. It's just one of those, like, she's so quick to just call her son anything. And it's like absolutely hilarious. So to jump now to a little bit more of a more down, sadder part of the book. So it goes into the background about Carm. So Carm, again, as the book title says, she is a Holocaust survivor and a licensed marriage therapist. Carm was 2 years old in 1941 when the Nazis marched into Yugoslavia. When Carm was only 4.5 years old, June 18th, 1944. Again, she's 4.5. She would have been turning 5 that coming August 7th, just to give you some perspective. The Nazis invaded her community and home. Carm, her mother, and her grandmother literally ran on the spot. Carm's father and grandfather were taken to Auschwitz and they were killed. Carm's mother ended up leaving Carm with nuns. Someone in particular, and I know I'm going to totally butcher their name, in my sincere apologies, Mother Goranesic. What Carm says is, quote, eventually my mother and grandmother were reunited with my grandmother's sisters and her 2 daughters. They hid together using those false documents. They didn't wear yellow stars, end quote. And in the Waldman household, they said this story during the book tour, and they also describe it in the book. They, again, grew up in a completely Jewish household, but there was a photo of a nun that was framed on the wall. For Joel, that didn't, growing up, that didn't really make much sense. And it turns out that the nun, the woman on the wall, was the one that saved Carm's life. And her name was Mother Matilda Goranesic. And if I mispronounced that, my apologies. And I thought that was such a beautiful, beautiful way to honor and never forget this woman that ultimately had saved her life. And now she has this beautiful family because of this one person. That part really, reading that just kind of really got to like the gut of me. And I was like, oh my God. So Carm had also talked about the pain of losing her only other son when he was just 3 years old, Rami, which was short for Abraham. He passed away again from an incurable illness. And Joel didn't know a lot of this information about Rami because he was so young at the time, to the point where Joel didn't even know where Rami was buried. So as Rami was starting to get sicker, that was just when Joel was being born. Joel was only 3 years old and Rami died. He doesn't have any memories of him. And Rami lived at a place called the Lynch House. It was a hospice exclusively for babies and toddlers. So Joel didn't really know much at all about his older brother, if you will. So flash forward to now. Carm is an 84-year-old grandmother of 8 and 1 great-grandchild, which is amazing. The book also gets into Roy, which is Carmela's husband, Joel's dad. So Carm and Roy married 63 years, and unfortunately, during the writing of this book, and as the book progresses, you see and hear more and more about Roy's decline. He fell violently ill with pneumonia on Carm's 83rd birthday. Roy was 88, and this snowballed into an avalanche of health issues. Ultimately, he ended up in a hospital bed and growing more and more helpless, nonverbal, forgetful, losing a lot of basic physical functions, which as we see happens when this happens. And also basically it relegated Joel's father to a hospital bed. Before that, prior to any of that happening, Carmela would discuss her relationship with Roy. A day had rarely passed in the last 63 years when Roy and Carm didn't kiss, didn't hold hands. Although Joel is quick to add, to be fair, in these decades together, Carm would scream at my dad with near equal frequency. My dad taught me one of the most important lessons of marriage. Let the yelling go in one ear and out the other. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious. He said this during the book tour, Joel did, and the room just completely lost it and laughed. It was so funny and not bad advice. So the book also, throughout, you'll see a theme of not only are the chapters Carm quotes, but throughout the book, there's this kind of, I call it kind of life according to Carm, where Joel would say, Carm, what is the meaning of love? Or how do you describe this? And it's just all these basic principles in life that I feel like we don't really think about. We just kind of go through. But Joel really wants Carm to put it into words as best she can. And like one of the things, for example, is Joel says, so why do you recommend marriage? And Carm's quick to say, well, I recommend a good marriage, which again, spot on. Carm and Roy's marriage, according to Carm, quote, we also had a meaningful relationship where we communicated about everything. We didn't hide anything from each other. We spoke openly. More than the physical attraction was our desire to listen to each other. We truly cared about each other, end quote. And that's just one of those, again, quotes where it just pulls at your heartstrings, especially as you're reading the book and you're reading about how sick Roy is and how his health is declining. And then to hear Carm say those just touching, beautiful things about her husband, it's a lot. It's emotional as you're reading it. What I loved, one of my favorite things about what Carm was saying was about parenting. What she has said, and she did not hold back. I love this. She says, I've seen so many people almost daily who should not be parents because they either don't have the mental disposition or the financial means to raise them right, or both. So who should really have children? I wanted to know. Life never ceases to amaze me. And this is a different quote. And one of the things that I've always found interesting is how many people become parents when they shouldn't. You don't need a PhD, which maybe you should. All you need is to sleep with someone and get their sperm. And then Joel adds, anytime the word sperm comes out of your mother's mouth, you cringe, including me. Which is, oh my God, so funny. But she's spot on. Like, no one wants to say those things, but she is spot on. And yeah, I stand behind everything she said. It's so true. It is so true. And I love how she just doesn't hold back. One of the things that Carm also says in regards to what is the key to being a good parent, as opposed to somebody who just raises a child. Carm says that first, all the child development theories around parenting pointed to nurture. Then it was nature, then nurture again. And being in the psychology field, the nurture versus nature argument, we all know it. And I feel like even if you're not in the psychology field, you know the nature versus nurture argument. And she says, so who really knows? Basically, the only thing she knows for sure is children need love and positive reinforcement. One of the things, again, Carm being Carm, that she says to Joel, I'm not sure, in regards to Joel saying, I'm not sure you gave me enough positive reinforcement and love. Carm says, you're 54, moron. I gave you enough for 17 lifetimes. I'm retired now, which is, again, love it. I can't say enough about like how much she's just like on top of it and just doesn't let him get away with anything. It's hilarious. One of the things that she also adds before moving on from the parenting topic is basically it's a myth. There's no such thing as being a perfect parent or raising a flawless child. Neither exist. So let me just see where you guys are in the chat. Carm has it going on. I'm telling you. Oh, you don't need to tell me, girl. But yes, Carm absolutely does. So yeah, if anybody is watching this back after the live and seeing Linda's comment, yeah, I agree with Linda. Spot on. Linda says, my mom was 13 when England was attacked. She shared many stories having to go to a bomb shelter, and the shit stays with them forever. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that, Linda. I can't even imagine. But yeah, it's just one of those, how can something so tragic and impactful, like a forced impactful moment in your life, I don't see how that could ever go away. I wish I could, but I always fight back. I'm not sure what comment you're referencing for that, but I'm sure it's a witty one. Okay, quick sip. So another thing that all right, James Watson. Linda was, James, you always come in very, a simple hi, how's everybody doing would be sufficient, but that's okay. Oh, gotcha. All right. So in regards to the subject about your own mortality. So, and this was, again, one of those emotional moments, Carm saying, well, when I was very, very young, I realized that we are not on this planet forever. At an age where most people I knew believed they'd be around forever, I knew this was not the case. From very early on, I knew I was only here on a temporary basis. The only way I could counteract that with jolting reality in my own head was to enjoy every single day, to find a way to enjoy. And yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier on, for anybody that's coming in late, where Carm is a Holocaust survivor and essentially had to run for her life at 4.5 years old, not even 5. And yeah, to say that she learned early on that people are only here on a temporary basis. It's so sad that young moment, everything changed. There was before and there was after. There's no in between. On emotions, kind of going off of a similar mindset, Carm says, emotionally, I think I've been cut off since childhood. I cut myself off from thinking about anything negative. I just never allowed negativity to seep into my brain. And at this point in the book, which I really liked, Joel compares Carm to a serial killer and a sociopath about, cutting off their emotions. And that's quite funny how Carm just kind of yells back at him, being like, well, if you're going to point out the difference, let me point it out accurately, type of thing. So in regards to emotions as well, Carm is quick to say, I love people. I really do. She considers herself an optimist, a people person, but she doesn't trust people completely. So Joel, being, as you see through the book, will make everything about himself in like the most hilarious way. He says, well, do you trust me 100%? And Carm is quick to say, no. I trust you 99%. I think you are a little bit too self-absorbed for me, but I love you 100%. That is just amazing. That's one of my favorite quotes from the entire book, is that. It's just so funny. So again, Carm being in her mid 80s, in regards to being asked about technology, she describes how technology has completely evolved since she was a kid to the present. And one of the things Joel asks her is, do you think you'll be sad to know that you won't be here to see kind of more of the evolution of technology? And Carm says that, yes, she will be very sad that she has to leave here soon, mostly sad that she won't be able to boss Joel around and her grandchildren around anymore. And for her, that's the hardest part. And then she adds a quote from Stephen Wright, which I had to reread a few times, not because I didn't understand it, but it just made such simple sense that you just wanted to read it over and over and be like, I get that. And the quote is, first, you don't exist at all. Then you're born and you live your whole life. Then you die. Then you go back to not existing again forever. So first you don't exist, then you exist. Then you don't exist. So this whole thing is just an interruption from not existing. Isn't that wild? Like absolutely wild. I just thought that was an amazing quote, and I'd never heard that before. So, all right, my only Carm, if you're watching this, oh, this broke my heart. This part broke my heart. Carm's feelings about cats. She says, I know this might be controversial, but I hate cats. I really don't trust them. And I have no idea what Zen masters and cats have to do with each other. I was like, no, Carm, you're like the perfect woman ever. What do you mean you hate cats? Maybe she just hasn't met mine. She has not met my cats. They would love her. She would love them. End of story. But when I read that, I was like, Carm, no. So, all right. We're going to get into a little bit more heavy emotion. So before I do that, let's just see where y'all. I laughed, I cried, and then I died. Yeah, there's so many quotes in here, Linda, that it's just like the sweetest thing. And then like 2 seconds later, it's like the funniest thing you've ever heard. But so again, more of life according to Carm with the book. And they ask about love. And Carm does say it's hard to put into words. She describes taking a bullet, for example. Basically, that it's one thing to say how much you love somebody, but it's about action. So she describes how she would take a bullet for any of her children. She says, also, the entire world turns on love, but so few people know what it really is, if any. And I thought that was really interesting because it's one of those, she goes a lot more in depth again with everything I'm talking about. I'm just giving you guys the kind of brief in a nutshells about each topic, but the category in chapter about love was very, very interesting because she's had so much life experience with that in so many different capacities and still not being able to kind of put it into words and acknowledging that so few people know what it really is. And I think that's a very spot on thing for her to point out. So, hey, Nick, just tuned in and heard she hates cats. So, you know what? I love Carm, so it's okay. But this is Carm. I know you came a little bit late, Nick. Yes, Surviving. Nick, I'm not sure if you've heard of the Surviving the Survivor podcast, but Joel Waldman and his mom and co-host put out a book. And yes, Carm does not like cats. In fact, she hates them, and that makes me very sad. But I love her nonetheless. But yeah, I could see if like that's the moment, Nick, that you like pop in and come in this channel. And you're like, wait, what? Because that's the complete opposite here. But I hope you're doing good, hon. So it gets to the point in the book, and I know. I give her some slack. It gets to the point in the book about Roy, so Joel's father and Carm's husband passing away. And it goes through when the hospital called that morning at 7. The family knew the time was coming, and they were there for ultimately when Roy took his last breath. And it's kind of interesting to read Joel's perspective of it. And then when Carm later discusses it, kind of reading her perspective on it, because it's two very different ways of processing. But that's not uncommon. But it was just kind of, it's one thing to kind of see it or hear about it, kind of, you know someone who's lost someone recently, but you're like getting more of an insight when you read this than you would with just like hearing a friend or a coworker or whatnot, someone kind of talking about, oh, I was there with my loved one when they passed away. It's different. This goes a lot more in depth. So it's just very raw. It's very real. And one of the things that Carmela says is no one's ever ready. And even though he was going to turn 90, you're never old enough to die. Never old enough. And there's never enough time. But that said, Carm says she had time to prepare herself mentally. The only thing she couldn't prepare herself for was her husband Roy grasping for his last breath. And I did say grasping. And then Joel jumps in and says, it's gasping, not grasping. And Carm just responds, oh, fuck off, Joel. Which is just, again, the theme throughout the whole book. But it just, again, it's one of those moments where it's such an impactful moment where you're, if not crying in tears, and then it has that, bickering between them where she's like, just fuck off, Joel, which is just awesome. Joel asks a very interesting question of Carm. He asks, how does losing dad compare to your father being gassed in Auschwitz? And because I know you said dad's loss was harder, but how is it different? And when I read that, I was like, okay, I'm very curious how she is going to answer it, because it's it's a different type of loss, but both tragic nonetheless. And Carm says, I lost my father when I was 5 years old, and I'm still furious about it. You have no idea how furious I really am about it. And her voice was filled with anger when she was saying this to Joel. She goes on to say, why am I still angry? Because death became a part of my life when I was much too young. The Nazis tried to destroy us. They ruined families for generations upon generations. That was, I do have to say, one of those moments in the book where you typically, besides Carm being a bit frustrated or maybe annoyed with Joel, you don't get anger from her. And this part of the book, it was just raw anger. And it made it that much more impactful, because you know what she experienced was absolutely devastating. But to now hear her just be so much more raw about it, more so than she had in the rest of the book, was just, again, one of those grabbing you moments where you're just in awe and shocked and just need to process what you're reading, because it's just such an intense level of emotion. The book goes on to talk about, in regards to afterlife, as well as the Jewish beliefs and traditions that follow when a loved one passes. So one of the things that, again, one of those emotional moments from Joel is, even though he has these back and forth moment with his mom, there's so much love there. And he says, towards the end of the book, I got teary-eyed that I may never see my own mother again once she is gone. Who can wrap their head around this now? Where is dad? What is dad? What is he now? And Carm says, nothing. He was not. No, he's no more. And he says, of all the brutally harsh realities my mom shared with me on our 53-year journey together as mother and son, this without a doubt was the most jarring. And it kind of they go a bit more in depth in regards to Jewish tradition, in regards to saying, and if I mispronounce this, my apologies, in regards to saying Kaddish, the prayer for the dead, ever since the day that Joel's father was buried. It also goes over the Jewish teachings about the prayer, which is invoked for 11 months. And it kind of goes over what different family members think about that. Carm says, I wish I could believe in the world to come. My mother believed it. May she rest in peace. My sister believes it, but I don't believe it. And that was very interesting, just to kind of, and we see that a lot with so many other religions too. There's this struggle of what happens now that your loved one is gone. And there's so many different ways to think of an afterlife, if that's something one believes in or one doesn't believe in. And to see that they, in this moment as a family, all have somewhat differing thoughts about this was very interesting and eye-opening as well. So yes, you see Tuca. Who else? Cosmo was chasing him in here. Loki's up there grooming himself. He just ate dinner. But yeah, that's the fat cat, Tuca. You know what? Carm would love my cats. I'm just saying. If Carm met my cats, that whole chapter about her hating cats, or not chapter, to me it felt like a chapter. I was shocked. that section about her hating cats. It wouldn't exist if she met mine. No, all good. All good. So, James, I knew you would be there counting. Oh no, that he is not a little kitty, I assure you. He is quite a chunky cat. So one of those moments, kind of as we're coming towards the kind of near the end of the book, and this was one of those paragraphs I was crying. Full of disclosure, I was crying. Carm says it's months, bit at time after Roy passed away. And Carm is saying, I was just cleaning out our place in New Jersey and found a note from him from years ago. It was beautiful. He wrote, my heart will always be yours. I love you. Joel adds, I was now crying again too. I had always known my parents were madly in love with each other, but until this very moment, I never fully understood how truly special this love really was. It's just something about it just like grabbed me, and I was just like, oh my God. It's just, I don't know. That was one of those moments where I was just like, had a moment. In regards to Carm kind of reflecting now back on Roy's decline and the care that he needed, especially as the end was coming closer and closer and he needed more and more hands-on care. She kind of looks back in regards to their marriage, and she has that little tear in her eye, and she says, I'll never say it was perfect, but it was pretty damn close. She says, in regards to the question of Joel saying, do you find yourself angry in the same way you were with your father's death? And Carm says no, but she wanted more time with her husband, Roy, but it can't be. That was just so sad as well. Some other little moments kind of going off, transitioning from those more sad moments in the book. Those funny quips in the book. So like Joel will say, because Carm gets very easily distracted throughout the entire thing. And Joel, I would go so far as to say, doesn't have the patience to just kind of wait for that moment to pass. And I get it. He's under a deadline. He needs the book done. But Joel just will say, like, can you focus for 5 minutes? And she goes, oh, fuck off, Joel. I am focused. I don't need to stare right at you to be present. Don't tell me what to do type of thing. Carm, in regards to now that Roy has passed away, she reflects more on the podcast that they're doing now and says, I'll tell you, the podcast is a lifesaver. It has given me real purpose and refocused me in a very positive, healthy way, which I was, she's such a light, like the brightest, best light of that show. Yes, Joel is awesome. I love Joel. He is awesome and phenomenal at what he does. Carm just brings something different, just a different vibe, a different element, and it wouldn't be the same without one or the other. And I'm just so grateful that Carm, like almost like realizing how much the podcast means to so many other people. It really means so much to her as well, and it's doing something for her as well, which is amazing. Carm's life quote that is said throughout the book is a Hungarian saying. It says, quote, the dogs bark and the caravan passes, end quote. Joel says, no matter what people would say or think, she wanted us to continue to move forward steadily like the caravan. So that's the end of the book. There's a post chapter, and that's where those pictures come in, as I mentioned at the beginning of the book, when they go and visit and if I mispronounce it, my apologies, Subotica, which is formerly Yugoslavia. Like there's this beautiful picture right here of Carm. And then one here where she's walking with her great-grandchildren as well as Joel's wife. Just absolutely beautiful photos. And again, they got to go back and visit, again, Joel's wife and his 3 children were there. They got to find the grave of Carm's dad and grandfather. With that being said, it's just a headstone. Laszlo Krishaber, he was cremated after being sent to the Auschwitz gas chamber. So It's just his name on a headstone. There was no body to bury, unfortunately, but nonetheless, to be able to find his gravestone, you read it where all of them find it in that moment. They're kind of searching through Joel, his wife, Carm, the children, everybody's looking to try to find that gravestone, and they find it. And it's just such a again, one of those moments. And again, it goes more and more on their trip. Joel saying, I'm standing outside the home that my mother was in when the Nazis came for our family. And just all those moments where Carm got to go back and see these places after so long. Joel got to go with her and experience that, seeing Carm see it as well as seeing it for himself, and having his children see that too and experience it, kind of where their ancestors came from, which just was beautiful. The postscript at the very end of the book, one of the best parts of the book as well, it's from Carm. Dear reader, after I read this manuscript, I felt embarrassed by my use of 4-letter expletives. I decided to work on eliminating curse words. Hopefully I still have time to change. Fondly, Carmela. Amazing, absolutely amazing way to wrap up the book. So, all right, folks, I just threw a lot of information at you guys. Again, the book Surviving the Survivor, a brutally honest conversation about life and death with my mom, a Holocaust survivor, therapist, and my podcast co-host. My overall thoughts on the book, amazing. I love the book. Everybody needs to pick this up. It talks, again, a bit about their true crime podcast, but just in relation to kind of as their story goes. But if you're a fan of the podcast and you want to get to know Carm and Joel more, pick this up. Don't just put it in your Amazon cart right now. Check out, pick it up. If you want a different type of book than what I typically recommend for true crime books, if I know not everybody's into that type of thing, but nonetheless, I know some of you will message me and say, hey, you recommended a book, I'm buying it, which is really, really cool. Again, this is not a true crime book per se. Still get it. It is absolutely phenomenal. Again, it is the best balance that I've probably ever seen and read of the emotional level and the humor level, in the comedic level. One does not outdo another. One does not overpower another. One does not take away or put it in a distasteful way against another. It's just the perfect balance. I really liked reading about Carm's story, her background, her resiliency. I wish she liked cats. Other than that, I love everything about Carm, and I wish she was my best friend. It makes a lot of sense when reading it, kind of getting an idea of what someone's been through, in certain things that we go through in life. It does shape how we turn out. And you read this and certain things make a lot of sense from both Carm as well as with Joel. I think a lot of the focus is on Carm in this book, as it should be, but you get that from Joel too. And I wonder, I mean, he's smart, so he knows, he knows what he's doing, but I'm like, he put himself in a very vulnerable position as well in this book. And I just think that's completely awesome, because not everybody would do that. They think about it. A lot of people want to put themselves forward in the best light possible. And we know Carm just doesn't give a shit, and we'll tell it like it is. But Joel, who just seems to have so much anxiety and whatnot, to have him kind of be so raw about that. And also throughout the book, just here's what makes him anxious. Here's what stresses him out. Here's what he worries about. He wasn't so much worried about putting himself in the best light. And that made me like him all the more and just feel more like, okay, I know, like, I almost like, him, even though you really don't in real life. You get that sense of like, I'm learning more about him. I'm getting to know his personality. And when you get that from a book and it's real and it's authentic and you can connect, that's just the best thing possible. Because otherwise we're just reading a book where it's like, okay, this isn't real life. I'm not connecting with who I'm reading about. It's just, No, like I felt I was right there with them. And a lot of the times I really felt like when Joel would like be at his mom's condo interviewing her, like in the back and forth, I felt so into the story that I felt like I was like on another couch, just like sitting there eating popcorn, watching it all unfold. Like I felt like I was there present, and they did an excellent job of making that happen. I really love the dynamic between Joel and his mother Carm, their relationship, the back and forth. There's probably like one of the best and highest amounts of love from a mother and son ever between the two of them. But then also some of the, like he says it best, they love hard and they fight hard. And that is just absolutely spot on. Some of the times I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that was just said. But then when you get to the end of the book, you're like, I see how it's just another day for them, just another day. But I liked seeing that and feeling like I by the end, you're like, I get it. The podcast ties, I liked that they referenced the podcast because I feel like that's where everybody knows them. So if they wrote a book where they didn't somewhat tie that in, I felt that would be just a little lacking. But I liked how they went through everything and got to the point in the story where it's, all right, we're bored. The pandemic's going on. Let's do this. How did it start? The shaky back, they just kind of were talking about X, Y, and Z. And the format completely changed when they launched into true crime. And as Linda had said earlier, she discovered them when she was looking for something else. I didn't discover them until they were already a true crime podcast. So to get this background, like, yes, you can go back and listen. I tend to do that when I find new podcasts. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I love this. Let me go back and download the 250 episodes I missed. I'm weird and I'll do that, but not everybody does. So to get that background of how they got to this point in their podcast, I thought was really cool too. So for anybody who wasn't there from day one, and who may have came on at a later point, you kind of get to see the evolution of how their podcast grew to, it's blown up in the best phenomenal way possible. So you get to kind of see how that played out. And then lastly, my final note is getting to read and know about them a little bit more from this kind of more intimate level. It just, to me, reinforces why I started listening to the Surviving the Survivor podcast in the first place. And if you think about it, not just with true crime, with any podcast, with any YouTube channel, there's so much content out there. If you're looking for a true crime channel, whether it's on YouTube or podcast format, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of options. If you're looking for any topic, it can be makeup tutorials. There are some great makeup artists that I know I follow and have followed for years on YouTube because I'm just a fan of their work. But again, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of other content creators. Why are we drawn to the ones that we're watching? This book really reinforced for me why I listen to them. Because I could get true crime information from, again, hundreds of others, but I go to them. They're one of the ones I go to, and that's not going to change. They bring such a different dynamic that I don't get with any others. It's so raw and real in regards to, again, a mother-son duo. They love each other. They go back and forth. I love when they go back and forth personally during the podcast, especially when there's moments from the guests where they're just like, they're just going at it. And I'm just going to sit here and be quiet until they're done. Like, it's just funny. It's funny because sometimes guests are like, what do I do in this moment? With that being said, they bring on the best guests. They have so many extremely knowledgeable people in the field, guests and relevant to the topic at hand. And you're not necessarily getting that from other podcasts. The fact that Joel does as many shows as he does, Carm's not there for every single one because that would be insane. There's so many. But the amount that Joel does, oh my God, it's a lot. It's a lot. I don't know how he does it, but I'm so glad he does. Because even if he was like, I'm going to take one more day off and not go live today, I'd be like, no, I need more content. And again, one of the stories that I want to mention, and I hope I do it justice, at the book tour that I went to this past weekend, they did questions and answers from people who went. And the very last woman who spoke, she said, I don't have a question, I just have a comment. And she basically had, in a nutshell, had said kind of her story about how, where she is in life, some sicknesses that she's had to overcome. But through all of that, she was so grateful to Joel and Carmen Surviving the Survivor podcast. They were like family to her, getting her through these times. And it was such an incredible moment to listen to. And I'm like, that she makes so much sense. Like, she's going through something in her life and she's choosing to spend it with people or podcast hosts that to her are basically like family, because she listens to them so much and they're so relatable and so real and so raw. You don't get that all the time from other content creators. There's this distance. And I feel with Joel and Carmen, there's really not. And with their podcast, there's really not. You really feel like you're there with them, like you know them. And that's why I listen to them. And I can't recommend it enough. So to sum everything up, amazing book. Absolutely get it for yourself. Subscribe to the podcast, Surviving the Survivor. Pick up this book. Again, it just came out. It's amazing. It's an easy read structurally. Again, emotionally, it's still a good flow, because it's the up and downs that make it just that much more easy to kind of read in one more sitting. Or maybe it's such a heavy topic for you that you just need to kind of read it in sections, and that's okay too. It's an amazing book. I can't say enough good things about it. And I am looking forward to seeing Joel at CrimeCon next week when I go, and just, again, saying how much I enjoyed his book. Unfortunately, Carm will not be there at CrimeCon, which breaks my heart, but I'll survive. I'll bring pictures of my cats and I'll be like, Joel, no, your mom would love my cats. So let's get that part of the book. Let's get it changed. So, all right, let's just kind of see where you guys are, and we'll wind it down. Thank you, Danny. I still can't believe I just watched one of their podcasts about 3 weeks ago. That's awesome. Keep watching it. They are on top of it, especially with the Karen retrial. They are on top of it. Danny, if she met your cats, she'd love them. I think so too, but you know. I know, James, you are nothing if not consistent. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of Danny After Dark. I'll say Danny in the Dark. Oh man, it's been a long night of Danny After Dark. I will be back later in the week with the weekly True Crime and Chill. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your night, and I'll see you next time. Remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.